Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We'll get started in just a minute or so. Okay, let's get started. Thanks everyone for joining us this evening on this informational session for the Miller Avenue Improvements Project. This evening's session is a webinar, so your audio and video have been disabled, but I will show you in just a moment how we will be interacting towards the end of this session. You can see at the bottom of this slide that there is the project page. So if you have any other questions, you can always go there for more information. And we will open it up, like I said, at the end for you to submit any questions or comments. So for those of you who are new to Zoom, there are two ways that you could submit your questions. If you take your mouse and you hover over the bottom of your screen, a panel pops up and there's a Q&A icon. If you click on that, this window will pop up and you can submit your question there, and that will go to all of the panelists. If you've called in this evening, then you can press *9 to raise your hand. I will unmute you and then you can share your question or comment. Okay, for all of our sessions and surveys, we have an optional demographic poll. And so I'm going to launch that during this session. It's completely optional. If you do not want to answer it, you can disregard it. This information is anonymous, and the city uses it to just get a sense of who's attending our meetings and what our outreach is. This is primarily an informational session, so I don't expect that there will be much conflict, but we do like to remind people at the beginning of public meetings that we're here to commit to learning and that we're here to critique ideas and not people, that we use thoughtful language when we are offering up questions or comments so that everyone here feels comfortable to participate. Tonight's agenda is introduction. Soon I'll be introducing you to the project team. They're going to, at a fairly high level, go over this project, which will include the timeline, as well as construction and the potential impacts to you. Then we're going to look ahead quickly at the second phase of this project, where we will get into a little more detail, but also we'll let you know when the next engagement session will be, where there will be more information then. And then we're going to do a Q&A and talk about next steps. So I'm going to hand this over to Brian, who is the project manager in our engineering team. I'll let him explain his new title here as our Proto Emeritus and introduce the rest of the team.
Good evening, everybody, and I thank my team for my new title, which is Project Manager Proto Emeritus, which is a very nice way of saying Brian is going to be retiring in a few months, and we'll be transitioning project management from myself to Jane Allen, my fellow project manager, who is also in attendance tonight. So Jane will be taking on a greater role in the project as we move through the final design phase of the work and into construction next year. Also joining us today are two other people from the engineering team, really in the transportation group of engineering, Cynthia Redinger and Trevor Bryden, who are both going to be involved in the design and implementation of the project as our transportation experts in the engineering department. So why is the city doing this project on Miller Avenue? First of all, there are utility improvements that are needed, kind of the unglorious but substantial part of the project. Miller Avenue from Chapin to Newport, old water mains will be replaced. That will be kind of the first part of construction that you're going to be seeing next spring. Also, that same stretch from Chapin to Newport is really, it hasn't been touched in terms of pavement rehab in recent years. Newport West had been reconstructed, I think, in 2013, and also there has been some work east of Chapin, but we need to repave the portion from Chapin to Newport. And there's also the implementation of the transportation plan, and it's consistent with the carbon neutrality plan from the city also. So what the project involves, I'm sorry, this gets a little complicated. It may sound a little complicated on the face, but we're going to try to talk through it. Again, phase one, looking at Chapin to Newport, water mains are probably about 70 plus years old there. They are, fortunately, they are not failing, but this is the time, since we need to do the road work, and we wouldn't be touching the road again in this stretch until, the 2050s or 2060s, when the water main would be over 100 years old. So now is the time to get in there, proactive management of our assets to replace the water main. That's the entire stretch from Chapin to Newport. There's also opportunities for stormwater improvements. We are in the Allen Creek drainage basin, and we do actually have a separate pool of money that looks for opportunities to provide some stormwater management, stormwater capture, before the water gets to the Allen Creek itself. So we're going to be looking at opportunities where we can to implement some improved stormwater management. A couple other key areas that we want to look at, we'll get into those a little bit when we look at the map, but just real quickly, pedestrian accessibility in the area of Ann Arbor Open School, and also bicycle access trying to get through the 7th intersection, which is a pinch point on the project. And again, the other key component on phase one is repaving Miller Avenue from Chapin to Newport Road. Kind of layered on top of that, if you will, is extending the cycle track facilities. So far, all the cycle tracks that have been constructed are really the downtown network. And there is a cycle track on Catherine that extends up to First. So the other component of this project will be to extend that cycle track. It's a two-way bike facility, extending that from First Street through the phase one project area all the way to Maple Road. So that's a real quick overview of what those projects, what the project is involving.
Do we want to take a look at the map?
If you want to take a look at the map real quickly, that would be great.
Okay.
I apologize. This does take a few minutes to pull up because it's a extremely large PDF file.
So it should be coming.
Yep, we've got it. Thank you, Cynthia, getting that up. What we're looking at right now is just a section of Miller Avenue. It's kind of the blue line that's slashing through from the lower right to the upper left. And the area we're primarily looking at is, again, near Ann Arbor Open School. You can see that kind of Ann Arbor Open on the north side of the map near the top of the screen. And a couple of really key challenges that the design team is going to have looking at to implement the project successfully is the block just east of 7th, say from Brooks to 7th. Now, right now, users of the corridor know that if you're traveling westbound through there and you're in a motor vehicle, you have a through lane. You also have a dedicated left turn lane. And then obviously the third lane is the inbound eastbound lane there. There are currently 3 traffic lanes. What happens that the bicycle community is aware of is that the bike lanes disappear in that block from Brooks to 7th. So we've sacrificed right now having dedicated bicycle lanes to have, in order to have the 3 traffic lanes. So what the challenge that the team is going to have is to look at how we can manage to maintain the 3 lanes of traffic, the 2 westbound lanes, the 1 incoming eastbound lane, and also install the cycle track, the bike facility there, which takes up approximately the width of another lane of traffic. In order to accomplish that in a fairly limited right-of-way, Miller Avenue is not a wide boulevard type road. It's a fairly narrow road. We are probably looking at actually having to remove some of the trees and maybe do something with some of the utility poles on the south side. It's not been determined exactly how that's going to be accomplished yet, but I just wanted to bring that up to everybody that that is something we're going to be seriously looking at in order to be able to accomplish the goals of the project, to get the cycle track in continuously out to Maple Road and also accommodate the existing configuration of the traffic lanes. So a significant challenge there, working within, again, fairly fixed, narrow right-of-way. The other area that is, Cynthia, if you want to slide it to the west a little bit of the 7th intersection. Again, this might take a second or so to do this.
How far west?
Get us, certainly past Red Oak.
Okay. How far? Here?
Right there, that's good. That's a good view of it right there. So certainly a priority is to be able to accommodate pedestrian. That's actually good there because it goes up to Pomona. We want to be able to accommodate pedestrian traffic going to Ann Arbor Open School. And one of the things that's important to be able to do for the pedestrians is provide access to cross from the south side of Miller to the north side. But unfortunately, right at the school currently, there are no pedestrian crossings. There's no crossing at Red Oak. There's no crossing right in front of the school other than a set of steps really that comes off of the front of the school and crosses over to Arborview. So one of the other challenges that the design team is going to be looking at is opportunities to get a crossing, say in the area from Red Oak over, in front of Ann Arbor Open School, to provide a crosswalk for pedestrians crossing Miller Avenue to be able to get to the school. There are challenges. Everybody coming into town is aware you are kind of cruising downhill there, going from west to east. There are sight distance challenges. Traffic is certainly speeding up as they're coming into town there, going downhill. So needing to look at speed management, sight distance. There's elevation challenges, if you will, just to be able to provide crosswalks there. So some pretty good engineering work is going to need to go into a high priority, which is getting crosswalk across Miller in that area, again, say from Arbor View to Red Oak. So those are the kind of the primary things, again, on that phase one project, where we're going really from Newport to Chapin. We've got water main that needs to be installed, replacing the old water main, some stormwater improvements, providing the room to get through with a bike facility at 7th, providing improved pedestrian access in the area of Ann Arbor Open School. So that's kind of a snapshot, if you will, of what the phase one project is trying to accomplish. And why don't we go back to our program, and you can turn off this for now. Maybe
Okay.
keep that handy, Cynthia. We might be referring to it back again. Thanks.
So this is something that you were just discussing, so I can.
No, so that gives you a great visual, kind of an overlay there. If you see the yellow line, that's the phase one improvements, Chapin to Newport, where we've got the utility work and the road work. And then the bike facility, the cycle track itself, extending, like doubling the distance of that, going from First Street out to Maple. So where we are right now, we are absolutely in a fall day right now, fall of 23 into winter of 2024. We will be working on the design and completing the design. The phase two portion of the project, which is really, if you will, the cycle track focus, there will be another public meeting for that will be occurring shortly after the first of the year. I think we're looking at January to get that meeting. And then in the winter, we will talk about, actually soliciting bids from contractors, later in the winter, so that construction of the project can start in spring and be completed in the fall. We want to start reasonably early as we can. The utility work, the water main work, it takes a fair amount of time. It's a fairly disruptive process, to the corridor. So we need to get that work started as soon as we can, so that we can move into the other stormwater improvements and then get the paving completed by, I would say, by this time of the year next year, certainly, to try to get the pavement completed, so the road will be 100% complete during the construction year in 2024. Construction impacts. First of all, road closure. Again, in that stretch we're talking about where we're replacing the water main. This is a narrow road. Water main construction actually does take up a fair amount of room, and you can imagine with the construction vehicles and with the trenches, the road essentially will be closed to any through traffic and be detoured. Limited access, that means we certainly 100% recognize a number of people live along Miller Road and will need to get to their house, so that there will be access, limited access. There's always delays behind construction vehicles and waiting for a truck to load up and deliver something and things like that. But to be able to provide access for those residents who need access right along Miller Road. And I have to say, it's the type of access that nobody who's a commuter is going to want to just try to drive through the area, because there will be delays and it will not be easy to get through there. So the access that we're providing is just for the local residents. During construction like that, we do maintain trash pickup services, trash, recycle, compost still gets picked up. Mail delivery still is accommodated. Absolutely emergency services are provided. Everybody is aware that that construction is there and makes their accommodations appropriately. People like deliveries is still accommodated. A lot of those folks will be looking for alternate routes, really kind of trying to come off some of the stride streets where possible to be able to make those deliveries. Again, things are delayed during that construction. It's difficult to get through there, but we do accommodate the traffic that needs to be getting through that area. Again, the main commuter route would be detoured. Oh, can I go back? Thanks. For those residents who live in that immediate area where the water main is being replaced, there are some planned water interruptions that's just absolutely unavoidable. We have to switch over from an old water main system that you are connected to over to the new water main. So there are some planned interruptions and you are notified. We have door hangers that are put out there ahead of time. So you are notified that there is going to be a planned interruption to your water. These are typically where we're doing a major connection and switchover, maybe on the matter of a couple hours on a few days. That's generally how that works. And then there's a very much a shorter interruption where it's almost a knock on your door because there's going to be about a 20-minute period where we're just switching over services, your service from your house, from the old water main to the new water main. So there are going to be planned interruptions and you will be notified of those if we're planning to shut your water off. I mean, and again, the other thing associated with this type of construction is just the normal noise and dust and general inconvenience associated with infrastructure construction and with paving. Trevor or Cynthia, do you want to talk about some of the look ahead of phase 2?
Yes, I'll jump in here.
Thanks, Trevor.
Yeah. So for phase 2, this is the stuff that's happening on top of the street, in particular, making way for our implementation of our transportation plan, in which vows to have no one die or be seriously injured on crashes on Ann Arbor streets by 2025. Miller Avenue is a tier 1 corridor. There was a death on the corridor a few years ago, and so Miller Avenue is up for serious reevaluation as far as its design to make it a safer place for all users to travel. Second goal is by 2030, our transportation system will contribute 0 emissions toward climate change, and that, as it's expressed through the transportation strategies, means moving from polluting modes to non-polluting modes, and in particular, encouraging people to walk and bike safely for in-town trips. And so having a high comfort facility on the west side is part of the carbon neutrality plan implementation.
Trevor, before you
please.
get into the goals, we did have one question that asked us to explain what a cycle track is. So this might be a good time to do that.
Thank you for stopping my flow for this. Yes. So a cycle track, deal with some new terminology here. A cycle track is a 2-way bike priority facility that is separated from other lanes on the roadway. And so we're going to be using a couple terms here. One is cycle track, which is that 2-way facility that we're talking about installing on Miller Avenue. And then the second term we're going to throw about is bikeway. And bikeway applies to the network of cycle tracks that are already in downtown. And so oftentimes the DDA and others will call those the bikeway. The bikeway is a compilation of cycle tracks together that work as a network. And so a cycle track is, the bicycles are going two ways on one side of the roadway rather than having the conventional side running bike lanes. How do these goals, Michelle, is that, do you think that went far enough as far as that explanation? Sorry.
Yes.
Okay, good. How do these goals apply to Miller Avenue? We are looking to design the streets for safety for all users. Miller Avenue is a constrained right-of-way, like Brian has pointed out. Vehicular speeds rise up pretty high going downhill. And so wanting greater separation and comfort for other users that are not traveling quite so fast is a goal for this project. Also wanting to make bicycling much more comfortable for cautious and curious riders. It takes a certain amount of courage and faith and ability to go out into a bike lane and not have that type of separation for vehicles coming from behind you. And so wanting to just have a little bit more separation and some countermeasures like the cycle track that are shown to to increase safety for cyclists along a corridor. And that will also come with needing to look at the traffic signals at 7th and North Maple. One thing that is a part of a cycle track, since both cycle track lanes reside on one side of the street, it is difficult to transition from a cycle track to a traditional side running lanes. And so any transition between cycle track and side running lanes needs to be handled very carefully. Part of the motivation for keeping a cycle track down Miller Avenue is to connect directly into the Miller-Catherine bikeway that is currently downtown and not need to have people transition over to those side running lanes. And here are the full extent of the project boundaries. On the far right side of the screen is the edge of the cycle track's end. As it currently is, it goes underneath a rail trestle and then comes up the hill towards Ann Arbor Open, as you saw. I guess it doesn't go the whole way here. This only takes it up to 7th. But the cycle track is intending to go from it'll connect from First to Chapin, where the utility project starts, and then extend from 7th all the way out to Maple, making a continuous cycle track experience for people using it. Again, it's used to provide separation and greater comfort, and we're also looking to slow motor vehicles down both through the dimensions of the cycle track in the roadway, but also looking for other speed management elements to also be applied to this project and designed into this project to control velocities of motor vehicles on Miller Avenue.
Great. And Trevor, can you clarify, we had another question come in about the completion of the cycle track. Is that also anticipated for fall of 2024?
Fall of 2024. That is our ambition.
Okay.
Talking a little bit about cycle tracks and the bikeways that have been built downtown. Currently, there is an entire loop of continuous cycle tracks bikeway downtown that goes along William on that south end, Division from Catherine all the way down to Madison, First Street on the west side, and then Miller Catherine along the north side. There are counters. There are 4 opportunities for counters all along that area to track its use. And as of now, those counters, if you add them all up along the bikeway, average around 10,000 weekly users across all of downtown. For the Miller Catherine one, just the section that's along the north side of that bikeway, it's the Miller Catherine currently registers around 250 to 300 daily users, to give a sense for how many people are using these facilities and how an extension of these cycle tracks can help feed into getting to downtown and all the way around and through downtown.
And can this question be answered yet if you're in the design phase? But a question came in about, is the cycle track separated from traffic with a curb?
So that's going to be some part of the design details due to the constraints of the corridor. We are going to be looking at both curb separated and other separation facilities throughout it. The goal is to provide the safest facility in there. There is also some things to work out as far as the number of people trying to turn or make turns in that area, especially cruising downhill. How permeable the cycle track is will play into some of our considerations as well. So we have not decided the exact way, the exact form of separation in here that'll be part of the project design.
Okay.
So some safety stats about the downtown bikeways. Since their installation in 2022, the overall crashes in the area have decreased by 44%. Pedestrian crashes have decreased by 44%. Bike crashes have decreased also by a similar amount, 42%. Fatal and serious injury crashes, which are the focus of our Vision Zero plan, have been reduced to zero in this time span. And the contraflow lanes, the lanes that are going against traffic that are not the conventional way in which cyclists are encouraged to use bike lanes that flow with other motor vehicles. At being a two-way facility, there is a lane that goes against other motor vehicles on a roadway. Those have only led to one bike vehicle crash during the time here, while there have been several other crashes that have been with the flow of traffic.
Okay, we've already answered a few, so thank you all for your patience. For those who may have submitted a question a while ago, I'm going to try to group them best I can by group. So if I start with stormwater, which is one of the improvements that will be made along Miller. One of the first questions submitted is, will the stormwater management improvements be similar to what is being installed on Brook Street now? And what level of mitigation will the improvements provide?
And Jane, who is our project manager for the Brooks project, can jump in on some of those improvements. But just let me say that on Miller Avenue, we haven't identified specific improvements yet. The focus is going to be on really underground storm capture where possible, and that's potentially in pipes that can infiltrate, also provide some storage, and then drain the remaining water back into the storm system to the Allen Creek. So the areas that we're looking at for underground type stormwater retention and management on the Miller Avenue project, it's a little difficult because of the slope of the road. It's difficult to do that management in a steeply sloped storm sewer. A couple areas where it does flatten out. One is kind of in that Arbor View area near, kind of in front of Ann Arbor Open School, where Miller does flatten out a little bit. So we need to look at the soils and determine if some type of storage infiltration would be viable there. Another area to look is further to the east, kind of where we're adjacent to that section of West Park. On the south side, there's part of the park that peeks out up to the road. Is to look at that as a potential area for providing some type of, again, underground detention, storage, and then release back into the system while accomplishing some level of infiltration. So that's kind of on an overview what some of the things the design team is going to be looking at to be able to accomplish with the stormwater management.
Okay, we have 30 questions, so I'm going to try to move swiftly while still having the engineers be as thorough as possible. Will stormwater improvements affect water entering West Park and the band shell?
No, it shouldn't, just because it's really two separate storm systems, the one that's along Miller and then the one that's down through through West Park. That's actually a county drain going through West Park there.
Okay. Will some rain gardens be incorporated? in phase 2, well, I'm gonna just stick with will rain gardens be incorporated?
I don't think we've identified those as a potential thing to include in the phase 1 project.
Okay. I'm looking to see if there's any more stormwater questions. Otherwise, I think I'm going to move on to some questions about the school. So one of the questions here is, will these upgrades include creating a school zone for Ann Arbor Open?
I can take that one, Shell. Yes, however, I can also say that a school zone, a reduced speed school zone, will be going in prior to this project with just static signs. That is something that we've received a request from the school district to implement that. So that's something that we're going to be working on in the interim. One of the items that we would be looking at as part of this construction project would be whether we're able to put in more of the dynamic style signs, but that is something that is actually already in the works.
Okay. These are two separate questions, but they're somewhat related. So, will you put in a crosswalk at Arborview? Children and families are already crossing here. And then the second question that's related is, are you considering traffic coming into Arborview from Miller? This is an unsafe area for pedestrians and cyclists because there's a merging of 3 streets close to Miller.
Yeah, I can take that one as well. Brian did reference this a little bit earlier, but I want to reiterate, we're looking at the area between Arborview and Pomona, Red Oak, Arborview, Pomona. In that whole area, we'll be looking at all of that as far as where the best location for an additional crossing will be. And we know that there is a desire out there, and we're glad that it was brought up this evening to reiterate that desire line is out there. We do have a little bit of a limited sight distance in some spots, and there are some design constraints that we have to consider. What we've shown this evening, it's really just a conceptual sketch. So we haven't really gotten into that level of design yet, but that is an area of interest that we are looking to provide some additional pedestrian crossings for. And the desire would be, Michelle, this is another one of the questions I noticed as in regards to some of the bus stops out here. We'll be working with the RIDE as we're determining where those final crosswalk locations will be located to make sure that we can co-locate the bus stops so that we can have the best access for transit as well.
Okay. So that may be covering the question of the students at ISD program at Second Baptist. They use the buses regularly, and many of the students use wheelchairs, which limit their range that they can travel to get on a bus. So will there be a bus stop near the church that is accessible to students? That level of detail has not yet been worked out, it sounds like, but we have this question that is recorded, so we will have that in our files to refer to during design. Okay, so there is a comment that they bike this route at least 3 times per week and think it's great that they're going to expand access so more people feel comfortable. Is there any plan to use level crosswalks to prioritize pedestrian crossings and decrease car speeds?
So that I'm going to interpret that question as whether we'll be having raised crosswalks. So the crosswalk being at the same level as the same height as the top of the curb. That is, that's not a design detail that we have figured out at this point. It is a possibility. You know, we We are looking at the opportunities to include speed management tools in the corridor. And that is something that it's a policy, and it's policy the council has stressed that be included in all of our capital projects. So that is something that we will be considering and looking at. It's a possibility. There are also other tools in our speed management toolbox that we could be considering as well.
Okay. So there are some more questions about bus stops that I'll just mention. Because like we said, that hasn't been incorporated yet into the design, but there are some questions here about will the bus stops, will there be safer bus stops? I'm not quite sure how to interpret that. So if this person wants to submit any clarification, but there is question about that. There is some questions about parking. So who would like to address if parking is going to be maintained along Miller?
As far as phase one area, there is no parking. I think this would be in the phase two, where the cycle track is extended to the west, and I believe that is really yet to be evaluated and probably be addressed more in our upcoming public information meeting.
Okay. Okay. Will there be any improvements to the Newport Miller intersection? It was once considered for a roundabout.
There's not sufficient right of way for a roundabout there. I know it had been considered in the past. It would have required purchasing property, and I believe that was investigated to some degree and determined not viable at that time. So there's no significant changes at that intersection.
Okay, and will that intersection remain open during construction?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And then similarly, when parents are picking up their children at Ann Arbor Open, which backs up into Miller, will anything be done to address that in the construction project?
The backups with Ann Arbor Open is I think an issue to be addressed with AAPS, to tell you the truth. One thing I've noticed there is cars kind of hug the curb and are queuing up on Miller, and other cars are getting by. That simply just won't be possible once these improvements are made. So this needs to be coordinated with AAPS and the traffic management there.
Okay, I'm gonna try to go through some of the water questions. When you need to shut off water for the changeover, does it only involve homes on Miller or a greater area of the neighborhood all the way over to First and Huron?
It doesn't involve it. It could go a little back just based on where valves are located on, say, some of the side streets, but it's pretty much just focused right along the Miller corridor and maybe slightly beyond that, but it's not a neighborhood wide, if you will, impact going further north of Miller or further south of Miller. We try to do it pretty localized. There's a lot of valves on the system, close those down and just work in those focused areas.
Okay. There's also a request if this is helpful to keep the map up so that maybe we can point to things as we're discussing them. So Cynthia, if you're able to, that could be helpful. If not, we can hold on to all these questions and maybe answer them at another time. We still have over 40 So there's a chance we won't get to all of them, or some of them are repeats, and we are answering with one answer, we're answering several. Okay, what kind of signal improvement is being considered for 7th and Miller? Trevor, would that go to you?
I can give it a shot, but I will keep it pretty high level. So 7th and Miller, I believe, due to the constraints in that intersection and needing to get a little bit more space, the existing signal supports will need to come out and be replaced with new ones. And then depending on how the configuration is, there will need to be some changes to the timing of what is going on there. Cynthia, is there anything that I'm missing on a high level? Oh, I guess the other thing to think about is in all these intersections with the cycle track is considering how bicycles are phased in on the signals as well.
Okay.
Yes, and the only thing that I have to add is we know that we will have to do some work at 7th, as Trevor said, because we're going to need to find some additional space within the right of way. But those are design details that we will be working out as we're moving forward.
Okay, there's two questions and also about this intersection at Newport and Miller. Is it being considered to put a traffic light there?
I think we are looking at doing a traffic warrant study. I don't know what the results of that were. I didn't believe we were, it had warranted. Do you remember, Cynthia? No. Cynthia, did you hear me on that? Do you know?
No, I'm sorry. Can you repeat that?
I'm sorry. The Newport intersection, was there a traffic signal warrant study done for that intersection?
That intersection has been studied several times over the years for signal warrant analyses and whether a traffic signal is warranted there, and a traffic signal is not warranted there. And so that is not something that we are pursuing at this point in time.
Thank you for verifying that. I just want to point out, this doesn't answer necessarily one of the questions or one of the earlier ones maybe. On this plot that we're looking at, the aerial, those red dots that are off on the side of Miller, those are the approximate locations of the transit stops. Just kind of an FYI, if you're wondering what those are.
Okay. If I could go back to a couple questions about the water mains, could you describe a little bit more about the size of them and the material? There are some questions about whether they've been inspected for lead. Have they been updated to 1-inch copper? So maybe some details about that will help answer some of these questions.
Yeah, as part of the design process, we actually have a pretty extensive inventory of the potentially lead impacted services. There are no lead services in the city, but some of the old galvanized water services can be impacted if there was previously lead connections on those. So when we're doing a project, if there are galvanized services, those get replaced. Those get replaced by a city contractor. So that evaluation is done by Public Services, who actually has a database of that. So if there are galvanized, they would get replaced. There are no lead services though. The old water main is cast iron. I think this one dates back to maybe the 40s, 1940s era, somewhere around there. Again, about 70 plus years old. It's a combination, as I recall, it's been a little while since I looked at the detail of some 8-inch water main, maybe some pieces of 12-inch water main. There's kind of little different sections there. The new main we will be putting in is a 12-inch diameter ductile iron water main. That is our current standard. And that will serve as somewhat as a 12-inch main. It's a little bit larger than the usual 8-inch main that you would have, say, on a subdivision street. And so it provides transmission purpose for the city, really moving the water through from one side to the other, as much as serving the immediate houses that are connected to it. So old water main, cast iron, 1940s era, 8-inch, maybe some 12-inch or 10-inch. New water main will be all 12-inch ductile iron.
Okay. There are some questions about RRFBs, if you want to explain what that acronym is and discuss if those make sense in this context or not. And if so, are you considering them on any stretch of Miller?
Seeing if Cynthia was going to jump in.
Yeah, I think so. This is for Cynthia.
I know the answer generally, but she might know it more specific. I could say what an RFB is. It stands for rapid rectangular flashing beacon, and they are user activated flashing strobes that warn anybody who is crossing that there's a pedestrian person on foot trying to cross the street. And they're pretty effective countermeasures for alerting everyone that someone is crossing in those areas. It doesn't require full traffic signal.
It's but it's rectangular first. Rectangular route.
Thank you.
Apologies, I was having trouble with my mic. Yeah, they are an effective solution that we use on typically on our multi-lane crossings. And so we do have, Miller kind of has a lot going on, right? We have this water main project that Brian and Jane are going to be seeing through to completion, which is part of the larger project of implementing the all ages and abilities bicycle network. So designing a bicycle connection that will service the largest majority of bicyclists that we can on this corridor, which we're referring to as phase 2, that sort of comprehensive look at things. Another layer on top of that, we actually have you'll probably see it in the capital improvement plan, but we have a safety grant that is going to be funding the installation of our RFBs. So these pedestrian activated warning devices west of Newport on that multi-lane section. So where we have more conflict points.
Okay. One of the questions is, will the street improvements and cycle track also involve changes or improvements to the sidewalks, driveway aprons, and or involve widening the roadway?
I think this probably falls along into design decisions. But whenever possible, we're looking to keep the curb intact as it is. There may be stretches in this constrained right of way where that is an exception, where their curb does need to change in order to accommodate, but this project is envisioned to keep the curb basically where it is across the length of the project.
Yeah.
Okay. How will residents put their bins out on the side of Miller with the separated bike lane?
Will come down to some design decisions as well, the way that it's solved along the cycle tracks, the bikeway downtown, in areas where there are trash bins to go out. There are concrete platforms on the far side between the bikeway, between the cycle track and the motor vehicle travel lanes, a place to put bins out for trash pickup.
Okay. As a part of this project, are there any thoughts about improving the lighting along Miller Ave? It is very dark, especially if you are adding bicyclists. Any lighting improvements to this project?
So corridor lighting changes along the entire length of the corridor are not currently part of the project. We will be looking at lighting in regards to crosswalks, especially any new crosswalks that we're putting in.
Okay. Will there be significant delay between paving Miller and installing the cycle track?
Generally,
Go ahead,
I
Brian.
would say we're going to kind of, it will probably be happening all as one thing once we get to the paving, because once the utility work is done and you start getting into repaving, the road itself, that's probably when the cycle track work is going to be ongoing also. There's always going to be some concrete work involved in a road, just if it's a resurfacing project. There's always some concrete work to be done. It will probably be done along the length where the concrete work needs to be done. And then the asphalt work, again, it kind of all gets done as part of one project. So you see all of it happening at once toward the end of the project, say into the September-October period. And then the final stage of that, which is actually going to be quite significant on this, is actually putting down all of the pavement markings.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Sticking with the surface here, there's a few more water main questions, but I'll stick to right now the cycle track. So the cycle track on Miller will be next to fast moving traffic coming downhill. Contraway bike traffic in this case seems very unsafe, especially for young cyclists. Can you address this issue? Which is to reiterate, right, that the cycle track will be buffered from traffic in some way.
There will be some separation between the outside lane, the contraflow lane of the cycle track, and the eastbound motor vehicle lane. That'll vary somewhat throughout the corridor. I guess all bike facilities don't feel comfortable for everybody. There's a far spectrum of what feels comfortable to whom, and we want people to feel comfortable where they're riding. And so one option for a person that wouldn't feel comfortable riding counterflow in this environment would be to ride on the sidewalk slowly, respectfully, and yield to anybody else walking.
Okay.
And I think it's also to point out that speed management is planned to be part of these projects.
Yeah.
We just don't have those design details yet.
Wanting to slow overall everything that's moving in the corridor, the cycle track will take care of part of that. We're looking for other ways in which to accomplish that as well. These are new facilities for a lot of people, and the experience we've had downtown with them has shown that it has encouraged more people that wouldn't typically ride to try bike riding out there.
Okay. There are sections of Miller that have brick roadway under the pavement. Do you plan to restore any of the brick as was done in Carytown?
No, the brick would be removed, what's encountered there.
Okay.
And that's primarily, it's east of 7th, where, in the older section of Miller Road, that there'd be some old brick.
Okay. How does the Miller water main project tie into and affect the timing for the proposed 2024 Crescent water main project?
They're largely coinciding.
Okay.
I believe the goal on that project is to, be under construction in the spring. That's a large water main project north of Miller in the Crescents, so west of Newport.
Mhm. Okay, I'm just looking through here because there's quite a few comments that have been submitted as well, which we will hold on to and refer to with the design team, but cannot all be read out at this meeting. Will the bicycle access take away from front yards on Miller? Assuming the bike path will be on the south side, will we have opportunities to ask to change our curbs?
Again, I think the only area where we're really looking at the curbs will probably have to change is between 7th and Brooks, where we're trying to add the bicycle facilities to the existing 3-lane configuration that's there. I think otherwise we have adequate width between the curbs, because if you think about it, the existing roadway does have bicycle lanes on both sides currently right now. So we're basically looking at taking that north bike lane, pushing it down to the south side and having those together. So I think where the curbs are primarily impacted there, we've got the drawing right there, the area between Brooks and 7th.
Okay. Can you guys explain a little bit more about the thinking of the two-way cycle track? This person is wondering why you don't have 2 existing directional lanes and protect them. So I guess they're saying, why not just a 1 lane on each side? According to the person who submitted that the cycle track causes traffic conflicts with cyclists moving the opposite direction of traffic, especially with regard to cars turning left.
Yeah, we can touch on this, and I'll also point out as I start this that I'll touch on it in a high level way, and that future public engagement opportunity is really going to focus more on the cycle track, but why a cycle track? And it really goes back to policy, and that these projects are implementing policy, and our transportation plan calls for an all ages and abilities bicycle facility on Miller. And well, what does that mean? That's a lot of words. And what does that mean? So that means that we are tasked with designing and implementing a bicycle facility that will serve as a comfortable facility for a large portion of the population who may be more curious and not quite as confident in their cycling abilities, and really sort of draw out that broader spectrum of folks and give them the choice of having a comfortable space to travel by bicycle. And what does that look like? And with our transportation plan, given the vehicular volume on Miller, there are some options that we have to choose from. All of them really include a physical separation from vehicular traffic. So right now we have bicycle lanes out there that just have a single lane line, and we don't have any physical separation between the vehicles and between those cyclists. And when we're looking at this corridor, it's very, very constrained in its right of way. It's very, very constrained by the large number of mature trees in the right of way. And we don't have a lot of physical space to be working with, especially as we're really trying to stay between the curb lines that are existing, you know, as we're implementing this project and being able to, you know, be mindful of our fiscal constraints as well. And once we start layering on all of those considerations, that's where the design decision just naturally led toward implementing this two-way cycle track. You know, for a lot of the same reasons that decision was made in the downtown bikeway network, because we do have these constrained conditions and we want to be able to provide that high level of comfort. And doing the cycle track allows us to provide more in less space, because we do have only one buffer that we need to be providing instead of the two buffers.
Okay. Can you all comment a little bit more on the anticipated loss of trees? Again, without a final design, nothing can be said for certain, but you had mentioned earlier possibly having to remove some trees to make room in the right of way. Is there anything more that can be said about that?
Yeah, I would just say yes, in the areas between Brooks and 7th. So on the north side, there's one large oak tree and a few smaller trees, and there's also some smaller trees on the south side. So we're primarily talking about that block between Brooks and 7th.
Okay. What's going to happen to delivery trucks on Miller between Chapin and Newport? I don't know if that question refers to narrowing, like that the roadway will be too narrow for them to fit, or just says, what do you expect delivery trucks to do on Miller between Chapin and Newport?
There will not be as much space to queue up, very similar to Ann Arbor Open out in the roadway. And so they will have to find some side street or another place to pull in off the roadway to make deliveries.
Okay, we want to talk about, I think this is probably a road ownership question, but there's a question of why not do all of this on Huron, where there is more room on the road to work with?
Huron in particular is a state-owned roadway that Ann Arbor doesn't have, as cannot design in this fashion on the state roadway, both not owning it and yeah, not controlling how it operates in quite the same way. It also doesn't doesn't go the same place that it's Miller Avenue goes. We have the all ages and abilities high comfort bike network is envisioned for many places around the city, not just one in each direction. And so Huron would be something that would be looked at as a good connection potentially for a higher comfort facility if we had more latitude to design it the way that we wanted and implement our plans the way that we would desire. However, it probably would be an additional facility on top of Miller Avenue instead of an either or.
Okay. So this is specific to Red Oak onto Miller. Maybe we can move the map over to there. So when turning left from Red Oak onto Miller, it is difficult to see traffic coming from the right, the west, because of a slight rise on Miller Road. Will those sightlines be improved as a part of this project?
No, if we could slide over there a little bit. Can you slide over there, Cynthia? Yeah, it does have a difficult configuration right now. We're really not looking at the changing the sight lines in terms of the vertical elevation of the road. We're not looking at doing that. It'd be an extensive reconstruction right there. But one thing we could possibly look at is some of the alignment in the way Red Oak comes in. I'm not sure what we can do with that, but it's kind of a circle that we did put on the plans to see if there is some way that that can be improved to help with the sight distance. Again, if you're, or the sight line, if you're coming south on Red Oak and you get to that intersection, being able to look to the right and see those vehicles coming. So if there's any type of geometric tweak we can do to that intersection to help that out, I think we're going to take a look at that.
Okay. And maybe just a reminder, there was a question for someone who came late, and this might also be helpful for people that have really specific questions about when are the detours, where are they going to be? Can you go over the timeline once again, Brian, because this is quite far into the future, so that's why there's not as many details at the moment.
Right. Exactly. We wanted to come and talk to you before there were really design plans in hand. So we don't have those to be able to show. So construction on the utilities on the water main, looking at starting those in the spring. I'll just say April as a potential start date for that. It's potentially pretty early in the year. So that's when we would see the work start. It would continue again, go from the completing the water main construction, some stormwater improvements, and then once those are completed, then later in the summer and into the fall to complete the paving work on the project.
Okay. I have two more cycle track questions. Well, there's probably more, but these are somewhat related. So are there design standards the project will adhere to in terms of track lane width, protection from car, and signage? And then also, as you're describing that, there's a couple questions about why is the cycleway planned on the south side?
When the city is designing bicycle facilities, we use the NACTO standards. So that's the National Association of City Transportation Officials. We also use the latest AASHTO, which is the American Association of State Highway Transportation Officials, and the Federal Highway Administration guidelines. So we do reference a lot of different standards as we are designing bicycle facilities. In general, they will look very similar to the other facilities that are already designed and implemented in the city. I'm sorry, Michelle, what was the second question?
And then
Why is it on the south side?
Oh, well, we have the advantage of West Park, which is a conflict-free zone, and the cycle track will be tying into a cycle track that's already part of the bikeway network downtown that is on the south side of the street. So we don't want there's no desire to force everyone to shift across both lanes of traffic to continue in the cycle track.
Okay. So there's a question that's similar to if Huron is owned by the state, there was a question about could these be done on Newport? Is Newport a state road? Or what's the reasoning for not doing anything on Newport? I mean, partly that's not a part of this scope of this project, but
and neither would Huron. Newport is not a state. Newport's a city road. But it is going a different direction and not part of Miller Road. It is in our plans to have a different type of bike facility on Newport, and so it would be something we would be under consideration with any project that would touch Newport.
Okay. There's some questions here about the process. People are feeling maybe that they'd like a listening session, maybe when there's more details done, that people have a lot of concerns about safety that we're not addressing at the moment. Like Brian mentioned, we're just letting you know that this project is taking place right now, what the general scope is. There will be more public engagement as we go. And while we can't address every single comment that comes in because there's still several more, we do have this recorded and we can review these and come back to you later at a later date. We're trying to answer some of the questions that we can right now. Are there any plans to bury conduit for getting power lines underground?
No.
Okay. How do you plan on plowing the snow in the cycled tracks?
The city has obtained the equipment that's needed to be able to maintain the cycle tracks. We've built up enough of the infrastructure with the protected bike facilities to have specialized equipment to do that.
Okay. And while we have the map up, maybe we can zoom out, but what are the limits of the water main replacement?
On the west, it goes right up to Newport. I think Newport is where we need to make the connection to the newer main, because remember there was work done on Newport. So there's newer main that we need to connect to right at Newport, right at the intersection. And then right going on the east side of the project, right at Chapin is where we need to connect to the rest of the system. So that's the extent of the water main work.
Okay. And then when you're resurfacing, or maybe you need to describe what resurfacing means versus maybe rehabilitation. But the question is, are you planning a reconstruction of the roadway or some sort of overlay?
It's the road pavement will essentially be replaced in whole just because it's going to be torn up during the construction. But the curbs will remain intact. The curbs do not get replaced. And that's certainly a huge cost issue with just the curb, but that also impacts the potentially stormwater costs. So by being able to maintain the existing curbs and replace the asphalt road between those 2 points, between the 2 curbs, that's what we call it. That's a rehabilitation project. So that's really where that term comes from on this project.
Okay. There's also another question of if we can post this on the website or for people to look at, or is this still kind of a working document?
The map itself?
Yes, this map.
Yeah, I think that would be great if technically, technologically we can do that and it's usable. I'm not sure if it's a giant file and it becomes really hard to see, but that would be fine to put on there.
Okay. I'm just gonna keep going till 7:30. I don't think we're gonna be able to get to all of these. And like we said, some of them are very specific, so we're gonna hold on to them and refer back to them. Are there any near future plans to add safer bike lanes on Newport for students who go to two school names, Forsyth and Wines? Which I think you may have just addressed that as a part of this project, there are no bike lanes going on to Newport.
Not on Newport as part of this project. Newport is part of the broader transportation plan, along with many parts in the city.
Okay. So in terms of construction, as people have talked about the word about the schools, can any construction happen during the summer months when school is out of session? Could you provide any more detail about traffic flow around Ann Arbor open?
Well, work will definitely be going through the summer recess. Again, it's a large construction project, so it will start while school is in session during the current school year, and it will be continuing into the fall when the next school year starts. And in terms of the traffic flow around Ann Arbor open during construction, we will be coordinating that with the Ann Arbor Public Schools.
Okay, has there been any consideration about having the cycle track grades separated at Miller and 7th? So I guess they mean at that intersection.
That is a design detail that we have not, we've not gotten there yet.
Okay,
We will, when we get into design and looking at that intersection and what that those intersections, you know, what that design looks like, there will be a lot of considerations, but we're not there yet.
okay. So as I go through these, I do think a lot of these questions and comments might yield a similar answer from us. So I think this might be a good time to stop. So I just want to reiterate for any of you that are feeling frustrated right now, we do hear you. We do have your comments. We will take them into account. And when we get into the next level of design, right, this is highly conceptual. There will be more outreach. So nothing has been officially decided yet, except for that this project is happening. So if your opinion is this should not happen, then there's not going to be as much room for that at the next session. The next sessions are going to be us progressing on this together with the people that attend those meetings. So we will be able to get into finer detail at a later date about these questions up here of, you know, what the cycle tracks is going to look like, how homeowners are going to be affected getting in and out of their property, where the, you know, if your driveway is going to be affected. All of these questions that you've submitted that we can't get to tonight will be addressed at a later date, like Brian mentioned, likely in January, after we've had a few more months to get into the details and work with all these other stakeholders, right? Utility companies, schools, possibly property owners in the meantime. So I really appreciate everyone who attended tonight. We can throw up the last slide just so that you have Brian's contact information. Oops. Let me go ahead and share that.
And it's
Cynthia,
also on,
oh, here we go. Sorry, I
it's
couldn't see
also
it.
on the project webpage.
Yeah, so here's the project website. There's more information. I will post this recording, so you will have access to not only what we shared, how we answered the questions. You can also go on the website to subscribe to receive construction updates so that you will be emailed any updates. We also email you to let you know when the next meetings are, in addition to sending you postcards to your home. And Brian is the project manager for now. As we mentioned, that this project will transition to Jane in the new year, but until then, you can reach out to him for any more information.
And just
So-
a note, if you go to the webpage, if you see on here, you have to type in the URL dot and then the rest of it. I was trying to get there without typing the URL and discovered I needed to do that.
Thanks, Brian. Thank you all for attending. Please check the website in the next few days to see the map will be posted as well as this recording. Thanks all. Have a good evening.
Thank you.